What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner and 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online conversation in the world for fathers and dads. It's sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I am the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative, which is a multimedia not-for-profit that showcases Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, wine, and travel. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And I want something new today. I'll say every once in a while, I'm Blackalicious. We're broadcasting live on June 27th, 2021. And most Sunday afternoons around the 5 p.m. Eastern time, we have an epic conversation called Black Canada Talking. And what is Black Canada Talking all about? It is a place where Black Canadians get to share their points, their thoughts, their POVs, or let it put about things that are important to them. And also we get to showcase Black Canadians that are doing their thing. And today, at the end of, as we do as always, at the end of each month, we have our roundtable and we have our wonderful participants. I know 3 out of 4 of them are here. I hope the 4th one comes in momentarily. So let me first introduce Miss Elle Jones. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Because you were like, I'm Black.
Blackalicious. You like that. How are things with you?
They're good. You know, it's summer, so a bit more relaxed, a little bit more time, although it never stops. But yeah.
Absolutely. I'll keep quiet because I know there's something, but I'll keep quiet because. Or you know what? No, go ahead. You have an announcement that you didn't get a chance to share last.
Yeah, I got a 10-year job at Mount St. Vincent University here in Halifax, so in the Department of Political Science. And
congratulations! That's fantastic. Well done.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Time, so, you know.
And there was a little bit of stress behind it, but I'm glad it's done.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, next up from Ottawa, Sarah Yongo is here.
Hi, actually from Gatineau, Quebec on Anishinaabe, Algonquin, unceded and unsurrendered territory. And I'm wearing not Jamaican colors. No, because everybody's going to say, oh, Jamaican colors. I'm wearing my ANC shirt, African National Congress, in honor of the martyrs of 1976. The children and youth who were murdered in cold blood by apartheid-era South African police for protesting apartheid. And it is still, here in Canada, it's Indigenous Heritage Month. In South Africa, it is Youth Month in honor of youth who will tend to be at the forefront of all movements for change.
So what's going on in Gatineau? Let me get it correct.
In ici à Gatineau. Let's see. Well, everybody is all excited because, more and more people are getting vaccinated, double vaccinated. So things are opening up. So there are fewer protests. There are fewer anti-mask protests, which is a good thing.
Yes.
And here and there, people are sort of having little outdoor events, and summer is here.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to get this correct. From Ottawa, we have Warren Clark.
Yes.
So Warren, what's going on, Warren? How we doing?
I'm good. No complaints. Thanks for asking. I really appreciate being here. Always good to have a conversation among some brilliant folks. So thank you.
And how's life in Ottawa treating you?
It's good. It's busy, but it's good. No complaints. It's not raining at the moment, which is a good thing. It was raining for the last couple of days. So, it was good to go outside for a little bit and get some fresh air without being, hit with some rain in your face. So pretty good.
Good
no
stuff.
complaints.
Excellent. Thanks. Well, thank you. Absolutely. Cesar is trying to be with us, folks, so hopefully he'll join us during the conversation, but we're going to get the stuff going. So our first conversation piece, and as I was saying to Sarah and Elle before in the early conversation here, this is putting us on the map. It's not the right thing that's putting us on the map, but our first conversation piece is the 751 unmarked graves of Indigenous children found at the former boarding school in Saskatchewan, Canada. Folks, what going on? Oh, hold on. Before we go any further, Cesar, it's here.
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, brothers. Hello, sisters. Sorry, just being late right now. Apologies.
It's all right. No problem. You get yourself settled in. We're going to talk about our first conversation piece, the 751 unmarked graves of Indigenous children found at the former boarding school in Saskatchewan. Who wants to first converse on that one? Give their thoughts.
I'll let Elle go and talk about Mi'kmaq territory and how it's being used.
Yeah, so I think the first thing, and as Sarah said, I'm here in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq people, governed by the Peace and Friendship Treaties of 1752. I think the first thing to say is that this shouldn't be shocking. And Canada always makes claims to innocence, which is what white supremacy always does. Pretend amnesia, pretend shock, and then we had no idea. But Indigenous people have been telling us for generations that they knew these bodies were there, right? Like people have said, you know, my friend was there overnight and then was gone in the morning. You know, we saw graves being dug, like we knew children were going out. So people have known this and we just didn't look for it, which is like very Canadian. We don't like to keep the stats. That's why we don't have race-based stats. We just like to bury everything. We bury everything twice, right? Like once you bury the body and then you bury the memory of that body. So, you know, it's been generations and Indigenous people have been begging for the resources to search these grounds, to find these bodies. And now that we're finally doing it, what are we finding? But like exactly what they told us we would find, which is the mass graves of children, which is genocide. So, you know, a few years ago when the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report came out, remember that like the media got distracted into this on purpose, into this debate on using the word genocide, even though they had given us hundreds of pages justifying why that was appropriate. And I think anybody who doubted that and I remember like certain reporters, like right-wing reporters saying that like, you know, they couldn't believe in the Canada wouldn't do this. Of course, what they meant is Africa is the place where genocide takes place and not us. We're not that kind of place, right? That this doesn't belong to us. And this is genocide. How else can you argue? But, you know, these bodies of children that were deliberately separated from their families and deliberately murdered through TB, through like abuse, through neglect, you know, there's no other term for this than genocide. So this reckoning is long overdue. Of course, many people are calling for Canada Day to be cancelled and for us to have a day of mourning and reckoning and accountability, which I agree with, because we can't separate Canada. Of course, people want to say, well, it's just a patriotic celebration, but it's on the day for a reason. It's to commemorate Confederation. It's to commemorate these fathers of Confederation who were intimately involved in creating these schools, who deliberately set these policies. And we cannot separate the celebration of Canada from that history and from what we are actually celebrating. So yeah, I think all Canadians, all people living in Canada need to, you know, like be part of this reckoning and what that actually means. And of course, not just for Indigenous people, although this is an Indigenous issue, but also, of course, Canada's entire history of enslavement and colonialism and violence, also against Black people. Of course, Nova Scotia being the place where Black settlement has been the longest in Canada and a place where Black people have been burned off the land, Black people have been starved off the land. You know, you can read people like Halliburton talking about like deliberately starving us as we came up as refugees from the War of 1812, like trying to get rid of us, trying to ship us away. Like this is part of our history. Cornwallis in Halifax, who, you know, like we had a population of Mi'kmaq people down to 1,200 people because of him scalping and murdering people. And it took us, like the Mi'kmaq community, years to get that statue removed. Like just like, can we get a statue down? You know, like these are the histories that we are, you know, relentlessly as Black people, Indigenous people having to confront and always facing this pushback on. But like that reckoning is long past due. So I think that's all I'll say for now.
Warren, you're up.
Echo, Elle, thank you very much for what you mentioned. I'm going to echo a lot of what you said. And the first thing I'm going to, point to, which, caught my attention in your talk is racialization and how dangerous racialization is. I think, you bring up points when you speak about African descent people and the genocide we've experienced here as African descent people in this Canadian nation state, this white settler Canadian nation state. But one of the things that we do very well in Canada, we practice social oppression. we practice not to remember. We practice not to acknowledge, and that's what we're seeing as well. Not to your point in terms of you're doing anything and a do harm approach. No, you're not doing that. But one of the things that I think is really important is to keep focus on what's going on with these Indigenous people. 721 and counting. That's horrific. Like we do something very well in this Canadian nation state is we group people together, we homogenize people's lived experiences. We call people BIPOC, people of color, and we miss the needle. And when we miss the needle, we never take an accountability as Canadians to actually say, what's going on with this group of people, and how can we really figure out what reconciliation really means for these group of people. With this being said, I'm still, even today, I'm speaking with a friend of mine, and this is me throwing no shade at her. She's watching. This is not me throwing shade at you whatsoever. But her approach is, what am I doing for Canada Day? Am I celebrating? Like, I'm confused, right? And it goes to your point, just what you said, El. We sweep things under the rug. We don't take these things serious because, again, like I mentioned a moment ago, we practice social oppression. We practice not giving an F, to be very honest with you. That's what we practice in this Canadian nation state. And this is why it's become normalized, as in by next week or whenever that people think it's back to normal, here's another sweeping of the rug. I read an article from CBC today asking or begging the question, what's next? Who's going to be charged? And considering that these are murdering of people, right? And the article is saying that who are they going to charge? Not the Vatican's not taking responsibility. The Canadian government's not taking responsibility. You have Justin Trudeau going on TV saying he wants the Pope to apologize. Why do you think no, you apologize. You take this serious. You make the legislation. We all know the Pope is probably not going to apologize, not going to come to Canada and make apology for these people. These people have been suffering for years and years and years this far and continue to. When you think about Ontario and the Indigenous peoples in Ontario, still there's parts of Ontario where Indigenous people's not even getting clean, drinkable water. When are we going to, really take these matters serious as Canadians? And I agree with you, El. Why don't we cancel Canada Day? I think it should be. I'm not a part of this cancel cultural narrative. However, I think this is an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? It's time to take a time out from celebrating Canada for what we think it is and recognize Canada for what it really is. Right, and that's where again, this is not me attacking your comments, El, but we need to be very mindful of how we racialize. We need to approach deracialization at this point. We need to consider what's going on with these people, and if we're going to speak about Indigenous peoples, let's focus on Indigenous peoples. It's not a point where right now, especially when these numbers are probably going to skyrocket to thousands, right? That's where we're going. Manitoba found a few bodies. I don't think they followed up yet, but 751 folks. I know I'm being very long-winded here and dumb. That's not what I'm trying to do here, but I'm going to paint a picture in people's minds here. Think of a child beside you, who's beside you right now, or think of a child that you know very close to you. Like, they murdered people that age, or murdered people that that size. That is disgusting. That is horrific. We can't give people a pass on this. If we're not being vocal on this, if we're not taking these matters serious, what reconciliation are these people really going to receive? So I'm going to stop there because I don't want to dominate, but I see Sarah and trusting that we can tag team this collectively. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Instead of people should stop talking about cancel culture and talk about reckoning culture, okay? Because it is about the reckoning. It is about the truth telling, all of it, ugly, as it may be. We should be talking about a reckoning culture. And Canada Day, in fact, July 1st should be the National Day of Remembrance for the Indigenous lives lost to residential schools. I know June, there is the month of June. As far as I'm concerned, all year, our First Nations, Inuit, Métis should, have a place of honor. But July 1st should be that National Day of Remembrance. For me, ever since I started following the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that was a number of years ago, and started marching with indigenous people from here, from Algonquin, from the Anishinaabe Nation here. I've always had in the back of my mind, the idea that I'm a settler. Yes, I'm Black and I endure racism, but I'm a settler like other people who came, after the indigenous, the original occupants of the land, and that it is my patriotic duty to continuously educate myself on how come there are so many indigenous people missing. I keep trying to imagine, like, what would this land look like if there hadn't been this? Yes, a genocide, cultural and otherwise, a genocide. What would this land look like? And all Canadians should have that in the back of their minds constantly and do what they can where they're at, whether it's psychologically, economically, or whatever, to be a part of, the process of rebuilding this indigenous community that was destroyed, right? And I highly recommend for people who are still sort of, it's still a theory. They live far away from Kawasas. They live far away from Kamloops and unmarked graves. No, y'all need to watch We Were Children. You need to watch that National Film Board film from 2012. I went to the launch of that at Library and Archives. I was disturbed for weeks after that, because just like Warren was talking about, look at the children in your life, around you, even in your home, and just imagine. They were children. They were children. They were snatched away from the arms of their parents and their communities, some of them never to be heard from again. And I'm sorry, for me, Canada Day will be from now on, the national day of, mourning and remembrance. And by the way, I was just telling a friend of mine in Washington, D.C., who was asking me, what the hell is going on with the indigenous people over there? The apartheid government in South Africa learned all of their barbaric practices, some of which were applied to the South African youth that I honor by wearing this shirt. They learned those observing what was happening on Indian reserves here in Canada. So, all those myths about Canada, and no, we even exported our ways to the continent. I'm going to stop there.
Cesar.
First of all, I am absolutely in solidarity with the Indigenous people of Canada and what they're going through. It may sound redundant to say that, but when we're speaking about 751 unmarked graves, we must update the number. It's actually, to the last numbers that I got, 1,323 when we count as of the 215 from Kamloops.
Thank you, Caesar.
As a Pan-Africanist, I must remind people that a man about 100 years ago wrote a book in which he talked of so many of the ways in which he would treat another community. And he learned that from Canada and the United States treatment of indigenous, aka the Nazis, Adolf Hitler, treatment of Jews and other minorities came from this education. As a Pan-Africanist, I must also, and thank you so much, Sarah, for talking about South Africa, but as a Pan-Africanist, I must remind our Black brothers and sisters that the very type of colonization that happened here in Canada upon the indigenous that is revealing all these graves, residential schools also existed in Africa. The same religious organizations that are basically being accused and being shown to have been involved in residential schools, you had similar organizations in Africa, such as here in Ottawa, Les Pères Blancs, where that's what they were doing in Africa. We must say it. That's what they were doing. The similarities are great. Allow me to go even one step further in showing similarities. Christian churches in Canada were the #1 slave masters. Yes, there were those like McGill, the founder of the university, but the church was the #1 slave master in terms of holding slaves. And the main two communities, if not the only two communities of slaves in Canada, were Indigenous and Blacks. So many similarities, how not to be in solidarity. And as such, in going a little bit further than what my sister Sarah said, it's not about cancel culture. I'm not into cancel culture, but it's about accountability culture. And as Warren said, it is not for Justin Trudeau to wait for the Pope to apologize when the religious and the RCMP will want to kidnap, let's call it what it is, will want to kidnap Indigenous children to put them in schools in order to remove the Indian out of them. That was decisions from the Canadian government since the very first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald. And as such, Justin Trudeau, for all the good that we can talk about Canada, and yes, Canada has a lot of positive elements as a country to live in, 100%. But for all the positive elements that we can talk about Canada, it is upon Justin Trudeau and his government to go beyond nice speeches and appearances, such as what happened in London for the Islamophobia attack, but to truly recognize the roots into the creation of this country. Because just imagine if in the Caribbean and Africa, our Black people knew that in this rich and developed country as Canada, so many Indigenous communities don't even have access to clean drinking water. Yet they see Canadians coming to build wells and, to propagate this postcard image of Canada, which is, it's a fallacy. It's a fallacy. So unfortunately, on the reality side, I strongly doubt Canada, they will be canceled for Indigenous issues, because ultimately they look at it from a perspective of, demographics and people voting and, community power, which truthfully Indigenous people don't have here. But why don't they have it? Because of systemic racism, because of colonization, because of institutional violences upon them, that basically right now we're still at the surface of all of these issues. More is to come. And I know you and so many others will stand in solidarity. We are settlers. We just came here differently. And God, thank you, our Black people are in no way responsible nor have caused hurts to Indigenous people. And as such, we are to stand in solidarity. There are too many similarities between what's happening to them and what has happened to us in the name of colonization. Too many similarities.
Anyone want to add on to what's been shared already? Anyone else? You've all come up with great statements right out of the box. Okay. So go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we've said, how apologies are not enough. I mean, Trudeau's gotten quite adept at apologize for this, that, and the other. I'm waiting for his apology on August 1st, Emancipation Day. He's going to apologize for something else, blah, blah, blah. One thing they can do, because I follow the work that Cindy Blackstock does, who is a great Indigenous children's and families advocate. Stop taking Indigenous communities to court. Stop it. Stop using my tax money that you could use to put water in Saskatchewan, okay? Clean water. Fix the houses there. Give them proper heating there. And help with some, sustainable food programs for the communities there and proper health care. Use the money for that. Take that money away from your high-paid government lawyers fighting Indigenous communities who all they want is fairness and access for their kids to proper health care and proper schools where they can, the children can get an education that enables them to be literate, functional, and then go out into the wider world and, build full lives, So that's one thing that Trudeau could do.
Okay.
Very quickly, I say too that people may not know, but a really important Indigenous abolitionist activist died of an overdose a couple of weeks ago, Corey Cardinal, and he had created inmates for humane treatment out in Saskatchewan. And on Canada Day, prisoners in Edmonton Max are going to be fasting for the victims of residential schools. And what they want to draw attention to, of course, is that Indigenous people continue to live in these prisons, which are just updated residential schools. So in the West, like 99% of the youth jails in Saskatchewan, I think it's 99% of the girls' youth jail and 98% of boys are Indigenous kids in the youth system right now in Saskatchewan. 44% of federally incarcerated women are Indigenous women. Over 30% of dangerous offenders in Canada are Indigenous men. And not because they've committed serial killings, it's they stab somebody once and then have another or something and they end up dangerous offender, whereas white men can murder 10 women and still not be a dangerous offender, right? So that's so prisoners are also making that connection between the residential school and the new residential school, which is the Canadian carceral system.
Thanks so much for that ad, Elle and Sarah. So we move on to our next conversation topic. It is summertime where we are at, and the federal parliament is going to be going for their summer holidays. So here's a question. Has there been any major legislation of interest to the Black community which was passed in this most recent session of Parliament? Have any of you heard anything? There have been lots of announcements, but I haven't seen anything big really action-wise happen. Anyone want to go ahead, Warren?
The only thing that I heard was they finally released application for the Black Entrepreneurship Group loan. So that has been released. Now, we may agree that's a good thing, but here's the other caveat to that. I think it's very important that we understand this is not a grant, this is a loan, right? So as much as it's available for you to apply as a Black entrepreneur, please do your homework. Please have financial literacy behind this. Do not just go and apply and grab your loan or money from the government. If you're not managing your finances carefully, you will be in debt. This is not a grant, right? I've spoken to a lot of people who about this loan. The first thing coming out was grant. Oh, they're giving us money. No, they're not giving you money. That's not how this works, right? It's a loan. So please, please, please do not treat this as a grant. Do not treat this as free money. Please educate yourself. I am strongly advising folks who are listening. It is really important. The government does not give free money. They're not the business of giving free money. I'm going to be very vocal about that. I don't know if anyone here would like to chime in on that. It's really important that we educate our Black community on this topic, particularly financial literacy. It's a huge importance. So I'm going to stop there so let people chime in.
Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of legislative measures that were taken, a lot of them had to do with the pandemic for the last little while. And while I welcome the fact that there were wage subsidy supports, etc. There were supports for people who, most like seasonal workers and that sort of thing. So once the pandemic is over, what's going to happen to that? And by the way, just because the House of Commons has risen does not mean that a lot of laws, the bills that were tabled have passed. So there may well be bills that could have benefited the Black community that have not been passed because the House has risen. And chances are we are going into a federal election, people. At our station, we're getting ready because everything indicates, people saying goodbye in the House of Commons. They were like 20-something members of parliament, some who've been there 18 years, 15, 13 years, or just one term, who are not running again. the floor crossing incident, which we will talk about when we talk about Anime Paul of the Green Party. People retiring from politics altogether. Like everything seems to be indicating that we're headed into an election. So whatever good legislation there may have been there, including items that were in the budget. Remember, we talked about the budget some time back, several months back. And when we had that discussion, we talked about some of the measures, including what Warren was referencing, the Black Entrepreneurship Program. There was some other initiatives like, this was kind of a wishy-washy measure, but a measure that would address the problem in our federal public service with the hiring and promotion and advancement, right, for people of African descent in the federal public service. By the way, that class action suit is still ongoing. So that's evidence that quite clearly there has been no legislation of any kind that is going to help that. I did not see legislation, for example, that is going to address like police brutality, for example, the public safety department. I didn't see anything that Bill Blair talked about, other than he made an announcement just this week about adding some white supremacist groups to the terrorist watch list. What is it? The 3 percenters were added. There were 3. There was one individual and 2 groups or something who are known white supremacists, dangerous white supremacists, who were added. I don't know if I should really take much comfort in that. It's a step, but otherwise there's nothing I can really, celebrate. There was some designations. For example, August 1st now is a national observance for Emancipation Day. The domestics being designated, a national, an event of historic significance, but those were all symbolic and somewhat performative. So,
El Cesar?
So, I mean, they finally got the first non-white judge on the Supreme Court. Can you hear? Sorry, yeah, I don't like the term non-white, but the first judge that isn't white went on the Supreme Court. But again, I don't know how important that is when 95% of cases in front of the Supreme Court are getting rejected and only 5% of appeals are successful. I was just on the phone before I got on here with a guy from prison who's lost his last appeal, and there's all kinds of inadmissible evidence in his case. So until we fully reform the courts, cosmetic adding of 1 or 2 people. And I mean, it's interesting that it's not a Black judge, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, so I mean, when you really, there's a lot. Yeah, we'll always invest in, and I'm not saying I'm against Emancipation Day. Obviously, Wanda Thomas Bernard from Nova Scotia was the senator who sponsored that bill. I'm not against that. If there's such a thing as national holidays, Black national holidays should be there as well, right? Ones that honor our history. But that is no replacement for the actual things taking place on the ground. So I don't mind having, but I wasn't aware we were emancipated yet. So let me know when Black people are free, and then because I wasn't aware we weren't still living in unfreedom. I've been fighting my whole adult life to get us out of unfreedom, So I think the problem as a Black community, of course, is that we want a break. We're tired. We don't want every day to have to go out and critique everything and fight everything. So we want these moments where can we just celebrate? But then of course they want us to sort of fall into, can we just celebrate, so that we're not keeping to push. So they want to give us these cosmetic things so that we go, okay, at least we're being recognized, which is better than not being recognized, but it's not as good as freedom, right? So we still have to always keep fighting. There has been some push on decrim. I was actually part of the National Drug Use Task Force on that under the health minister, so to try and propose a path to decriminalization of drugs in Canada. But I mean, that has no legislative force. We'll see what happens, I'm not optimistic, and I was on the thing, so there's been again, there's some cosmetic moves around mandatory minimums, but crowns and cops still have discretion. So we know that they're going to continue to convict and press Black people and give us the heaviest sentences and not let us into drug court and all of those things. So there is some movement, and I do believe the health minister is serious about like decrim. She's spoken openly about her own family members that have had issues with addiction, but that like doesn't mean that we're actually going to get that. And of course, that's important because George Floyd, for example, was a victim of the war on drugs, right? And when you watch the trial with Chauvin, of course, they tried to make the fact that he was allegedly on fentanyl as the reason why he deserved to die, and this cop was not guilty. So we cannot disconnect the protesting that we all did and continue to do in that movement from like the fact that this was also about the war on drugs, the arming of police, the increasing of budgets to police is all about this war on drugs. And until we get rid of that, Black people will continue to be incarcerated. And speaking of Floyd, of course, Chauvin just got sentenced. My friend Margaret Kimberly said they didn't sentence him for killing George Floyd. They sentenced him for starting a movement. And she's like, they'll never forgive him for that. And that's why they gave him a long sentence. She was like, I was never scared he was going to get a short sentence because like, look what he sparked in Black people. And that's what they're punishing. And I think that's probably a pretty good read. So I'll stop there, and Cesar and Warren.
I just want to say I echo that, Elle. It's funny. It's coincidentally really quickly. Cesar, I'm sorry. I always do this to you, man. I'm sorry. I always jump in right before you talk, and I'm so sorry. It's Elle's fault. Let's not blame Elle. I'm joking, Elle. I'm joking. I'm gonna read something to folks that coincidentally, Elle, you brought something to my attention. Well, actually, my father did before I went on the show today. He sent me this video that indicates Black men who has done I'm using this term loosely, petty crimes, and received a maximum sentence, such as stealing a $135 coat. It's actually a video I can forward to people who are interested. A smidge of heroin, and not justifying that it's okay to do stealing and drug use. I'm not saying that. But the comparison here, what I really want to bring attention to is these Black men who received life in prison with no parole. And the video then speaks about Derek Chauvin getting 22 years or 22 and a half years for killing murdering. Sorry, I'm use that word in my talk here, George Floyd. What was compelling to me, what my father said in his note, he says, what has Black people done to deserve such treatment? And, I sit here, just people know, if you want to say happy belated birthday, I will take that. My birthday was on June 19th, so Juneteenth. Miraculously, the work I do is crazy. Eh? Well, no, anyways, I sit here as now a older man, I'm 40 now, and my father, who is now, coming to me for education and asking me, what do we do? And I don't know what to say to him. It's very telling where my father, when I was a young age, my father looked at me and said, Warren, these are things you have to look out for. Like, as a Black young man, you gotta protect yourself. You gotta move a certain way. And here it is, my father now in his late 60s, looking at me and saying, darn, man, like, what do we do? It's if we're not taking Black liberation serious, all we're going to be doing is passing our trauma to our next generation after us. We can sit here and have these conversations as much as you want, but I think we are at a point where we need to be due diligent. And Dr. Vibe, I appreciate you having this platform for us to do that. We need to mobilize these ideas a little bit more seriously and being with intention. If we're not being intentional in what we're doing, then we're going to be looking back at our age and asking the young folks to fix it when they're going to look at us and say, I don't know what to do, taking these matters, the indigenous, people's concern, now I'm going to conflate a little bit, and then, African descent people in white Southern nation states, not only Canada, but United States, and not taking these matters serious, I think is a huge concern. I think it's, education is a huge concern. We need to look at that and fixing our education problem, because we're not even receiving the information. These young people are not even receiving the information. Dr. Vibe, Sarah, I appreciate what you mentioned with the ACMP earlier, but the ACMP is never going to be about Warren. I'm going to publicly always say that. It's about giving back to our young people so they get this information, so at least they have the tools to equip themselves to actually solve some of these issues. Elle, Sarah, Cesar, I appreciate you. You folks are in the trenches in education doing what you guys do best. We got to continue to educate our young. We got to continue to give them the knowledge and the know-how. So at least when we look at them, we can say, you know what, here's a little bit of information so you can do the next step here because it's important. So I'm gonna stop there, Caesar. I apologize to you. You know, I always keep cutting you off. That's not what I do purposely, but it's adding value. Thanks.
Cesar?
It's all good, brother. No harm, no harm. I don't want to say much because our sisters, Elle and Sarah, said it, and you also said it, Warren. But I'd like to remind our people that too often Black plight and suffering is addressed more in matter of cosmetic than concrete results. In Canada, we get loans, aka recognition of systemic racism and injustices in history and society, but you get loans that you have to reimburse with interest rates. In the United States, we get cosmetic, aka anti-Asian crime, and then comes a bill. Meanwhile, George Floyd, there's so many Black people killed, is still for debate in the Senate. We basically get Derek Chauvin, this white murderous cop, mocking the family, talking about, hoping for them to find peace in court, getting the mockery of 22 and a half years in jail, aka 15, if not less. And yet we have a young brother by the name, I picked up my phone because some of my friends from my debate club, Black and Brown Debate Club, sent me this. And you can see here, you see a dog. Kelontre Bearfield got 34 years for killing a police dog by the name of Jericho. I can't make it up. This is since slavery, since le Code Noir, the Black Code of Louis XIV in the middle 17th century. In the Western world, the life of a dog is more valued than the life of a Black person. So it's always cosmetic when it comes to Black people. Let's don't get it wrong. Ultimately, it's not for us to be begging and waiting for a system of white supremacy, Arab supremacy, Aryan supremacy, Han supremacy. It's not for those systems to change to us. It's for us to mobilize, to adapt, adjust, and impose our ways towards them. It is for us. It's in our community. It's in our families. It starts in our families. I celebrated my first Juneteenth this year because my daughter is half African American. But it starts in our families, it starts in our communities. That's how we get respect. As I remind people all the time, because we're talking about legislation, we're talking about George Floyd, we're talking about loans. And I will end this. I think, I know we all know this, but I'm not sure if we all make the connections. When New York City was shown, especially the NYPD, the police department of New York City, was shown the racist elements in the stop and frisk policy in terms of who was getting the most arrested, who was getting most killed by cops. Whether we look from Amadou Diallo in 1999, if I remember the year, to Eric Garner, etc. The whole stop and frisk policy. In New York City, there's really 5 communities: white, Blacks, Latinos, Asian, and Jewish. The police only kills Blacks and Latinos. They don't kill the Jewish and Asian communities. It starts in our families, it starts in our communities. I expect and await nothing from those of white supremacy, whether they be conservative or liberals. I expect greatly from myself, from our community, and as such, working towards them. We must come to a place where we dare to be Black, unapologetically Black, without needing a mask to go to work, without needing another mask because we have white friends, without needing a mask because our spouse or boyfriend, etc., may be white. We must dare to be unapologetically Black and to walk tall and proud. You know, Wakanda, Black Panther can't just be a fiction if we don't dare to live in the reality of that unapologetically Blackness about ourselves. Allow me to stop here so that we go to the next topic. But yeah.
Go ahead, Sarah.
The Senate, or?
We're going to talk about the Senate next.
Okay.
Okay. So we are on our next conversation topic, and the Prime Minister of this country has just appointed another Black woman to the Senate. Cornwall Major Bernadette Clement. So, Sarah, obviously you want to talk about it, so go for it.
Yes. So, much to our surprise, out of nowhere, on June 22nd, Prime Minister Trudeau announced that Bernadette Clement, who is, well, she resigned now, but was the mayor of Cornwall and actually the first Black female mayor in Ontario, and a 3-term city councillor of Cornwall, was going to become one of 3 new appointees to the Senate. So for our American friends, because I know there are some who are watching, our Senate is appointed. They don't have to go to elections like in the United States. And the appointments process has tended to be very partisan, so that each prime minister would very obviously appoint people from their own party so that there would be a better chance of whatever legislation from their party passing in the upper house. Because here you need both houses, just like in your system in the US and in Great Britain, both houses must, approve a bill before it comes law. So one thing, we can criticize Trudeau for many, many, many things, but one thing that he expelled all senators from the Liberal caucus. So there was no longer Liberal senators. They became independent. Now we have different groups of senators. You have independent groups, you have Canadian senators, you've got, okay. So basically how it works now is that there was an independent advisory board for Senate appointments that was created. And as of 2016, 52 new senators have been appointed using that process. And one thing that process did do is blacken up and, brown up more, because there are more of the South Asian, Middle Eastern, there's more of those than there are of us who have ended up in the Senate. So that's one thing. And Canadians can apply directly for Senate appointments, or somebody can nominate these people. And then all the I'm thinking in French, les candidatures, all the applications are reviewed by this board, et cetera, et cetera. They have their criteria, and it's really on merit. So we're not going to get, the former head coach of the Montreal Canadiens. I'm sorry. I'm from Quebec. I shouldn't say anything, especially now that, the Canada's only hope of winning the Stanley Cup is Montreal Canadiens, go Habs, just saying. But I mean, come on, the former coach who really didn't know very much about politics and wasn't known to be all that active or whatever, or a certain preacher who ended up doing certain things that we don't approve of and will not talk about. There were a lot of missteps as a result of the partisanship. Now you get people who have the kind of experience, the kind of professional experience, and the kind of community experience, like Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, who are able to shine a lens on whatever legislation is being studied that couldn't be done previously because you did not have people with that kind of baggage. So again, for our American friends, there are 105 seats in the Senate, and there are 12 that are vacant. And we haven't had a lot of Black folks, in the Senate. The first one was Ann Coles, and this was back in 1984 under the current Prime Minister's father, Pierre Trudeau, in 1984. And after that, we had to wait a few years until Brian Mulroney, a conservative, appointed Donald Oliver from Nova Scotia. He became the first Black man. And then we had Calvin Ruck, who was there for a minute, from 98 to 2000, also from Nova Scotia. Then, of course, we had Don Meredith, the second Black person from Ontario. Recently, we had Wanda Thomas Bernard. That was in 2016. And finally, Quebec got one Black senator, Dr. Marie-Françoise Mégy. So you actually had, a person who's a woman, who's Black, and who's a medical professional, who can, for example, be on a committee about end-of-life care legislation, right? And then 2 years after her, Dr. Rosemary Moody was appointed. And now we've got Bernadette Clément. Now, Bernadette Clément is important because now you're going to have 2 Francophone Black women, right? Because here in Canada, you know, the whole bilingual thing, the realities of being Black and Francophone, you know, that isn't often addressed in our House of Commons and in the Senate. So if there's going to be language, you know, legislation around language, you know, language has come up a lot lately in the House of Commons. If there's going to be anybody who can speak for us French-speaking Black Francophones, whether it's Caribbeans or recently arrived African immigrants, we're going to have somebody up there who can speak to that, who is from outside Quebec. So let's not sort of poo-poo and discount, you know, the appointment of Bernadette Clément. She's also a lawyer. She's a very effective, very prominent, very well-respected lawyer. She is completely bilingual. You would never even know she was Francophone. She goes back and forth in both languages. And let me tell you, that's a sister. You're not just going to walk over that sister right there. Oh, no, you're not going to walk over her. And we need more Black women like that in the upper house, so that whatever is being done in the lower house, whoever's trying to cause mischief down there, in the upper house, there's somebody looking out. I'm going to stop there.
Anyone want to add? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next conversation piece. Ms. Paul, leader of the Green Party. Her leadership has been contested. And Cesar brought this conversation subject up about areas of racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism. So Cesar, can you lead us on this conversation, please?
It's funny how we're in June and yet last month in May, I was talking about Black support in terms of Israel or Palestine, and basically addressing if those 2 communities, Israeli Jewish and Palestinian Arabs, support Blacks as much as they would want for Black to support them. And the answer is simply no, absolutely not. And now, a month later, we see what's happening to Green Party leader Annamie Paul in a mix of racism and sexism, which she denounced herself, but also anti-Semitism as she's Jewish. And I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm not seeing all that support from the Jewish community towards her. I'm not here to judge her myself. I will support her as she is a sister. She's a Black woman in a difficult position. However, it's important to remember that her conflict began again with this Israel-Palestine conflict, which is leading to her being contested in a position of leadership in a Green Party that's very, 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 very white party. I don't want to say she just happens to be the Black face. I don't want to diminish her nomination. I don't want to do anything or to say anything that could be used against her, but where are all the Jewish people to support one of the fellow Jews, even if she's Black? Where are all the feminists to support her as she is a woman, even if she's Black? Where are all the so-called Green Party non-racists? Don't get me wrong, she did get support as when her leadership was put to challenge, she got to stay, but her candidacy, basically her leadership, will be challenged again and again over a matter of not only Israel and Palestine, but also racial dynamics, and I should say racial and gender dynamics within that Green Party, because yes, first Black leader of a federal party, first Black woman as well. You see, we just talked about Bernadette Clément. Congratulations to her for being nominated in the Senate, and yet here we are in terms of leadership, a Black woman, Anna Paul, at the intersection of racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism, and we don't see the support of those that likely she wasn't Black, they would be supporting her, at least far more openly. So that's what I meant by wanting to bring that up. Because to me, honestly, and I mean, I say it again, time and again, Black people will never be respected as long as they will be part of those Abrahamic faiths. They will never be respected. I'm a former Christian and a former Muslim. I say it openly, I don't hide it. Black people will never be respected nor seen as equal as long as they will claim to be Christian, Muslim, and Jewish. It will not happen. And Hindu as well. It will not happen. It's that simple. You will never be respected, never be seen as equal. Anna Paul is just getting a taste of that at a political level and at a leadership level as a Black woman. I send in solidarity to her, but in solidarity with that reality check that comes back. Please, Sarah. You're on mute, Sarah.
Oh, who muted me?
No, you're good now.
Okay. So for our American friends and people outside of, the whole federal party system. So she was elected in October 2020, and it was not easy. It was pretty hard fought. I mean, I think I recall 8, they went 8 rounds. And I think the person who came second was this white guy. And he was not all that gracious, when the verdict was rendered. And people have been talking about Elizabeth May's role in this. Elizabeth May, who supposedly, retired from the leadership, is the parliamentary leader. But there's noises that she may want to just get back into that leadership role. What doesn't help Anna Paul is that she hasn't been able to sit in the House of Commons because she's not elected. It's not like in the United States, where Trump could become president and he could become the leader. He could become the leader of the Republican Party and then be president, but not be elected in a district, in a riding or whatever. In Canada, it doesn't work like that. You have to actually win a seat. Unfortunately, in a by-election, because the former Minister of Finance had to resign. Well, yeah, he was resigned. He didn't just resign, he was resigned. His seat was vacant in Toronto Centre, so she went to run there to try and win a seat. Unfortunately, she ran against a very popular former nationally known Black television personality in the person of Marcy Ian. Love me some Marcy, but that was not going to help her cause. And she has to run again. Anna May has to run again to win a seat so that she's not making statements on behalf of her party out in the hallway or in the National Press Gallery instead of standing up in the House of Commons and speaking. And there's also a lot of controversy around the timing of Jenica Atwin's, crossing the floor. Apparently, there had been negotiations. The Liberal Party apparently has, their hands in this as well in trying to, rattle the cage a little bit. And as Cesar said, the misogyny and the racism. And I don't know if you've listened to Anna Paul when she's speaking, to the press or in her town halls that she has been holding, speaking very much, about the housing situation, about how COVID-19 has disproportionately made life harder for the marginalized, et cetera, et cetera. She speaks very forcefully. She's a woman of her convictions. She's not scared of nobody, okay? And, the whole Maxine Waters effect. When you're a Black woman, you speak forcefully, you speak your mind, you're not, you refuse to be just a figurehead. And like Cesar was saying, the blackface, for the party that hopes to still be pulling the strings and setting the tone against your will, that's not what they got. So, they may be just looking to, she's not a Jagmeet Singh. She's not doing the Jagmeet Singh thing. Jagmeet Singh of the NDP also had problems, with people inside his own NDP. I know here in Quebec, remember the incident where he was out in the street and he was meeting and greeting, etc. And some white guy goes up to him and goes, you should remove that turban. I would vote for you if you remove your turban. A practicing Sikh. So, there's still this thing about a person of color in any sort of national leadership whatsoever.
I want to jump in. And thank you, Serena, for being like the best listener and commentator through this. You've been all along just making great comments. So thank you so much for your participation. I think I'm a little perhaps different than everybody. I mean, I will never discount racism and sexism ever. Like, I don't care if you're a black serial killer, like racism is probably still impacting the way you're seen. So there is no doubt, and there's no discounting the role of misogynoir in the treatment of Annamie Paul. That said, I do not see how you can head the Green Party and support war, given that war is the #1 environmental, destructive damage, like the amount of environmental destruction from weapons, from what's put into the atmosphere. So Annamie Paul needs to gain some courage of conviction when it comes to actually challenging some of the major, and I say the same thing of Jagmeet Singh, right? That the difficulty is if you want to be a leader in a white supremacist country, you have to have proximity to white supremacy, and nobody's been able to negotiate that space very well, including Jagmeet Singh, who I would also be critical of in the same way. So we recognize that they are really fighting an impossible battle, right? They have to lead a party that does not really want them there, that wants them there as tokens. And then the minute they say things like Canada is racist or colonialism exists, then their whole party's, we can't win an election, right? So I will always understand that it's difficult. But that said, the fact that her advisor, Noah Zatzman, is out here threatening members of her party and she won't say to him, no, that's not okay. The fact that she supports the war in Israel, you cannot support global white supremacy and then not think that it's going to come for you, right? So you want to support all this stuff. You don't want to say anything about Palestinians. I know what, Cesar, you're well, we shouldn't be laying ourselves out for this. But you cannot support Israel, which is supported by American weapons in the Pentagon, which is supported by the right-wing elements in Canada, and not challenge that, and then be shocked when racism comes back home to you. And I'm not saying I would be better at doing this. I'm not saying I would know the right answer if I were a Black woman trying to negotiate all these things. But I think everybody failed in this. Elizabeth May needs to get the hell out of the way. If you said you don't want to be the leader, and this has happened in so many organizations where a long-term leader leaves, that's hard to say, and a Black person is almost always that's when you'll see a Black person brought in to do the mop up and then get screwed over, and then a white person comes back as leader. So I'm not discounting that she taking over from Elizabeth May in any environment is impossible because she was the first leader, right? So, and she needs to get the hell out of the way and let whoever's leading lead. But Paul needed to challenge her own party when her own advisors, and she didn't want to do that. And then Atwin, I think, was correct on Palestine, but then walked it back immediately. So she also lacks principles. And I was in Fredericton right before she got elected for the climate marches. And I saw that energy. You could see that Atwin was going to get elected because people were so fed up with the Liberal Party and wanted something done on climate. And she was brought in to do that by her own people. So then to cross the floor, basically, and give up on what you were elected to do, I also think is a problem. So I have problems with all of them. But that's not a sole critique of Annamie Paul, because there is no party in Canada that has an anti-military stance. There's not a single one. We never have. When we have foreign policy debates, we don't debate our role in Haiti. We don't talk about Canada in Africa and the role of AFRICOM. We don't talk about our military maneuvers. I live in the most militarized along with Quebec, right? Quebec and Nova Scotia, the two places where a lot of military comes from. I'm in a port city. We have nuclear subs coming into our harbor and we don't even challenge that, American subs. Until there's a party that's willing to talk about Canada's foreign policy, that we're spending $800 billion, on fighter jets that we don't need so that we can play G.I. Joe instead of housing people. So until we fight the military-industrial complex, which is connected to the prison and policing complex, they give the surplus weapons to the cops. We have to challenge these things. And Anna-May Paul is certainly not alone in not challenging that. The Liberal Party doesn't, the Conservative Party doesn't, the NDP doesn't, and the Green doesn't. And so I will be ultimately always critical of anybody until they agree that Canada's foreign policy is racist and imperial, and we need a strong challenge to that. And that is connected to what we're talking about with residential schools and anti-Blackness as well.
Warren, go ahead.
Al, thanks for bringing that smoke, because you just allowed me to say what I have to say. Thank you very much. I was trying to say, give him that smoke, Al. I was trying to get in there, but you were giving it to him, so thank you. I heard the term yet this week. Your skin folk your kinfolk is not always your skin folk. You know what I mean? And we talk about. I'm going back to the new appointed senator. I think it's amazing, sir. I really appreciate you laid down the education on us. Much appreciated. But I'm always going to be one of what are you doing with that power? How are you going to, really strategize and plan for people who you say you want to liberate? I'm always going to be that. I think, respectfully, Elle, I think you would agree when I say this. You've taken a new appointment, and so have I, respectfully. We are going to be in a position of power, and it's our duty now in this new role. How do we use this power to continue educating in a do no harm approach? Because how dare us go into these roles and oppress young people or oppress learners? It's a huge contradiction. It's an oxymoron. It's like, how dare you, right? With Anna-May Paul, to be very honest with you, the Green Party, if you look at it, it's a socialist movement. That's what it is. They are for the the environment. They are for anti-oppression, anti-racism, and so on and so forth. And some of the things that I've heard and read in the news in terms of how her advisor, like Elle just mentioned, is she didn't reprimand or even address the her representative, where I think it could have been addressed. I question that, right? Like, what is the the mandate, or what is the outcome is that they're seeking? We talked about Jagmeet Singh a moment ago in terms of how he's playing on that on the fence with white supremacy. I think at this point it's like when you're in these positions, you either do what you say you're going to do, or you don't. And if you don't, then you have to ask yourself, why are you doing this, right? Like, is it for fame? Is it for fortune? Is it for why are we doing all this work that we're doing? Are we really trying to liberate people, or is it? And I've never been in this space, right? I'm only speaking from the perspective as an educator, right? Like, maybe one day I'll be there. I don't know. And if I am, then I'll get more insight. But when you get into these roles, and you see the nonsense, I think it's a point you have to ask yourself: why stay in the nonsense? Is there another way that you can liberate people? Is there another way that you can, use your voice to actually make change? I look and rely on my mentor a lot. Although he is not Black, and he was a white man, he passed away last year. I remember when I had this drive to be in politics, and he looked at me and said, "No, you can use your voice other ways." And he was absolutely right. I don't need to be in the mix of white supremacy to say that I have power, to say that I can make change. We can do it other ways. And I think this is an opportunity. Again, this is not me swaying anybody's opinion about Anna-May Paul at all. This is not me saying you should, vote, whoever party you want to vote for. That's up to you. But I do think, if we're not being able to liberate the people we say we want to liberate, then why are we playing in these sandboxes? So I'll just stop there.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, yeah. Before I make my quick comment, I'd like to send a shout out to Kevin Friday, my friend Kevin Friday. Kevin Friday, he's made several comments about the political process because he ran in Ottawa Vanier for the Conservative Party in a riding that had a heavyweight who had been there for many years. And I have to salute that, you have people who look like us who are just going ahead and, running as candidates at great cost in all kinds of ways to represent in the political arena. So I had mentioned that in our media world, there's all kinds of noises about an upcoming election. And while I agree with Warren that we don't all have to get into politics to make a difference, to make change, to bring voices to the table that don't get heard. However, I have to salute organizations like Operation Black Vote Canada, which is the Canadian equivalent somewhat of Black Voices Matter, where they are encouraging people to run, but not just encouraging people to run, but equipping people to run, Warren, by making sure that they have, boot camps to educate them so that they know what to expect, finding ways for them to get mentors so that, they don't just go in blind, etc., helping them organize their campaigns, etc., etc. So it's important for those brave people amongst us to continue trying to get into the political arena at all levels, because we do need not just a presence, we need the people and the voices. And by the way, this political process, we pay for these governments, people. We can't sit on the side. We pay. It's our tax dollars. All the salaries they get, the staff, they have to pay, the officers, they rent, and the retirement they get is our taxes. It's all our money. So we can't just sit it out. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Cesar, Cesar, then Warren.
Right.
I'll go quickly. First of all, saluting Kevin Friday as well, my friend of more than 20 years and a member of our Black and Brown Debate Club. But the last thing I will add is that effectively, Black people in the logic of politics, in the world of white supremacy, as any racist supremacy towards Blacks, find themselves stuck in terms of, on one side, to what extent can I dare to be Black and truthful to what I think and feel, and the other extent, the little place that I got here, as hard as it got for me to get there, to what extent am I willing to go in order to keep it? This is what's happening here with Anami Pohl in terms of the refusal to directly challenge her so-called advisor, which has led to the loss of one of her party members who was sitting in the parliament. Understand, the Green Party losing one member, that's 33% of its membership in the parliament. That's how small, but also strategic each and every decision becomes. At the end of the day, we end up suffering a sort of schizophrenia, such as has been denounced since by the likes of Frantz Fanon, but also James Baldwin, in terms of Black people have to eventually decide, do I dare to be unapologetically Black, or to what extent will I be you Negro? If you understand, James Baldwin said, I am not you Negro. Yet we have so many of our Black people, and here, the Candace Owens, so many politicians, so many even activists, the fist is raised until some opportunities come by white supremacy, and then suddenly you see it lowering down, looking at the potential of opportunities. This is fundamentally a problem. I do not want to say or do anything that can go against the Green Party leader, our sister Anami Pohl, but eventually it has to be a reflection within one's own Black soul. I mean, Al said it so well. At the end of the day, you cannot support Israel and its war machine, etc., upon the Palestinians in a context of colonization, most of all, and yet want to talk about what? The environment, peace. It's so fundamentally contradictory that it becomes ideological schizophrenia that is a reflection of one's own Black soul in non-Black spaces.
Warren, did you want to add?
You're on mute.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I always do that. My goodness.
No, you were good until then.
Yeah, I'm not.
It's all right.
Kevin, really appreciate your comment. I don't think we ever met. Thanks for your comment. I just sent him a link to our private chat, which I'm asking to be sent to the public chat. And my comment in terms of, and not my comment's not to sway anybody's opinion about the Green Party. Please, no. My comment is based on things I've read in media, such as Mel Woods mentioned in September of this year or of last year, sorry. Eco Socialist Green Leader. It could happen in what does it mean for the Green Party? So it's me pointing to that this is something that this party is thinking about. So if we want a chance to read that article, please do. So just want to say that. Sarah, you mentioned something that that I wanted to acknowledge, and I appreciate you saying. But and Cesar was talking about it just a moment ago. I appreciate these vehicles that equip our young or people who want to get into politics. But we have to also consider what Cesar said from a phenomenal analytic is that when we think about these notions of ideology, it's still entrenched in whiteness, and still going to equip these people to then think through whiteness and to only manage our Black lives or Indigenous lives through whiteness. I think it's a really important topic to consider. Especially trying to align ourselves within a white supremacist Canadian government that doesn't want us there to begin with. You brought up a good point, a good example with Jagmeet Singh. That example where you brought up with the white man approaching Jagmeet Singh, saying, and the reason why I'm more intimately known to this example because I actually teach this in a lot of my courses. He said to him, if you take off the turban and cut off your beard, you'd have more chances of winning the election. That's even white Canada. If I think it was the situation happened in the east coast of Canada. So I think Ellie, you probably know more if it did happen there. That's again white Canada, backing up white supremacy's views in terms of how you should align with whiteness. There's no if, ands, or but. One of the things that I'll pull up a book right now. Paul Ricoeur, Phenomenology. That I'm reading. As much as it's interesting stuff, oh my gosh, it's mind-blowing using it for my research. I do not lose sight. This is white supremacist thought. This is white supremacist thought. I'm going to bring the book that's right beside me. Fanon speaks about this. We got to be more diligent about what type of education we're taking in here, folks. This is white supremacy's game to the end. If we really don't take heed of what's going on here. It's not only through education, it's through fashion, it's through media, it's everything that we know is through whiteness. The only thing we can do is acknowledge it and be very anti-oppressive and anti-racist in our conversation, in our talk. We have to be very mindful of the things. How do we even know the things we know from an epistemological approach? How do we even know the things that we know to be true? Where does it come from? If everything is entrenched in whiteness, then we have a duty to start questioning the things we already know. So I want to stop there because I think there's another topic and there's always something to say.
Anyone else before we go on to our last conversation piece? All right, we're good to go. So the last conversation piece, how's the anti-COVID-19 vaccination campaign going on in our Black communities?
Terrible.
Okay, go ahead, Warren.
Terrible. So you know what? I'm going to rant here today, folks. I'm sorry if I'm ranting, but it's really important that we acknowledge that there's still, even today, I watched a video of a person I know actually in the GTA. I'll say broadly because I don't want to, villainize him on this platform here. On his platform saying that, this vaccine is nonsense and we shouldn't take the vaccine and, Black people wake up, right? Like there's still, these concerns, and, I'm going to be vulnerable with folks who's listening. What is important for us to for me when I think about this COVID-19 is, my aunt. My aunt's been in the hospital since January, and thank God, she's still with us. But I'm telling you, her condition, if she didn't have that vaccine, I'm telling you, folks, she wouldn't be even. I'd be still mourning her passing, which thank God I'm not, right? Like, everybody has a different view on it. I can't tell you what to do, but please know that, I know a lot of people in the healthcare system, I know how stressed out many of these nurses are. I know that there's a lot of people who are sick, and it's not, this COVID-19 is not does not discriminate. Everybody's it can be impacted by it. But in terms of our Black community, I think that we, a lot of more education, and I think there's an onus for people like me and everybody else who's on this platform to use our voice to actually discuss why it's important to actually take the matter serious. Not necessarily, I can't tell you go get the vaccine, but it's important to at least educate yourself enough to know why you're doing it. A lot of people are going off blind faith. A lot of people are going off, and Cesar, you've mentioned this so many times, and I appreciate you, my brother, for mentioning this, is that even though the religion that you claim to say, that, Cesar, I'll let you chime in more on this, that you claim to say to give you the information as to why you shouldn't take a vaccine is through that white supremacist discourse yet again. So I think there's a lot of understanding why. I think there's a lot of people that and I get it. A lot of people just want that quick information. They want to use that banking system education in terms of just deposit information. Let me just learn to do what I got to do, or doing what I don't want to do. But I do think they were at this point in terms of what's happening with this this coronavirus. I think it's really important that we take a little bit more heed in our community. So I'm going to stop there for others to chime in.
Sarah?
Yeah, well, there's still that problem of vaccine hesitancy, but I'm getting the sense that it's less than it was even a few months ago. And this has a lot to do with different Black communities organizing online town halls with physicians and nurses and medical specialists and virologists and researchers who look like us, some of whom have been filmed actually getting vaccinated. Because it's one thing if it's Fauci or Dr. Tam, our Dr. Fauci, telling you on TV every day, blah, 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 the virtues of, the vaccine. But it's a whole other thing when you've got Black medical professionals who look like you telling you, listen, you are my people. I love you. The devastation we're seeing in the ICU is such that we can't do this anymore. Conspiracy theories are not going to get your loved ones back who've been lost to COVID-19. So please do it. So I have to applaud the proactive measures that have been taken by organizations like the African Canadian Association of Ottawa here, the Jamaican Canadian Association in the GTA. My God, they had a huge vaccination drive that was very, very, very successful. The initiatives over in Montreal, in the Montreal Nord neighborhoods as well. And that's been very effective because I find not just Black people, but all of us, there are too many of us who still are not making the link between if we break the chain of transmission, vaccination, masks, hand washing, et cetera, once we manage to break that chain of transmission and community transmission slows down to practically nothing, the sooner we do that, the sooner we can get back to quote unquote normal, whatever normal is going to look like, because I don't think we can really go back to business as usual. Myself being a continental African, I am extremely, severely preoccupied with what is going on in Africa. And I'm going to be letting Cesar talk more about that, because as everybody can imagine, the vaccination rate over there, people want to be vaccinated and they cannot be vaccinated because there are no vaccines, okay? The supply is too little. When it gets there, rich people can buy their way to the front of the line. Some governments are hoarding. I'm hearing some clinics are, some people are even stealing, the stuff right out of the warehouses, and they are appearing in private clinics where people are getting vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera. And now in the sub-Saharan region, that's where I'm from East Africa, Kenya. I'm from Lake Victoria area. our entire area, Kenya on one side, Uganda on the other side, there is now like the epidemic is out of control. The India virus is the India virus. I shouldn't call it the India virus. It's the Delta virus is there on top of I think it's the Beta virus, which is the South African one, which has been there since February of last year. And we have to get a handle on this because that region in sub-Saharan Africa is a hub. Flights coming in and out from all across the continent, from Europe and from Asia, to access all the different countries, south and north. I'll let Cesar continue with this.
What I would say very quickly, I will take the example of what's happening in Uganda, where I was informed this week by a white sister, Amelia, who has been doing a lot of humanitarian work over there, about the tragic cases that are happening in Uganda where COVID is spreading. And not only you have bad governance, but as well as Sarah was mentioning, the very nature of corruption. It's not unique to Uganda. It's too often the case in far too many of our countries. There comes a point in time where we have to stop blaming the white man and the Asian man and the Arab man and the alien man. No, our countries are severely failing our own. Yes, some will say it's easy to criticize from the Western comfort of living in Canada, but it makes no difference. It absolutely makes no difference, because whether here or over there, at the end of the day, the tragedies that our Black communities worldwide, in Africa, in the Caribbean, I mean, you look at what's happening in Haiti in terms of how it is actually spreading. It's not enough of a conversation, but COVID is actually spreading, and yet we know the great insecurity, but also failure of governance along politics, as in Haiti, that is not making it easy to vaccinate people. Yet, people want to get vaccinated. They don't want to get vaccinated because they didn't learn from another campaign from white supremacy to kill Black people. No, they want to get vaccinated because they want to stay alive, because they read and they hear about what's happening to other communities, other nations. I mean, we talk here about the Delta variant, aka the Indian variant, how it's killing and decimating people. I talked earlier this week, actually, no, last week, sorry. I talked about how in Brazil, it has crossed 500,000, 500,000, more than 500,000 people have died by COVID. Guess who principally has been dying? Black and indigenous people, as always. So yes.
Elle?
I'll go, but very briefly, because I want to watch Queen Simone crush the competition on day 2 of U.S. gymnastics trials. But also to add into the international piece, of course, is also the embargoes that countries participate on. So Cuba, for example, which has a long history of sending doctors across the Caribbean to provide free medical care. But of course, the U.S.-led embargo, which just came up for UN vote again. 182 countries voted against it. U.S. and Israel voted for it, and 3 countries abstained. And despite the overwhelming global support to end the blockade, there's still a blockade. And of course, one of those things is like needles aren't getting into Cuba. So, they're developing their own vaccine. Cuba actually developed like the hepatitis vaccine. They have this amazing history of medicine and can't get their own people vaccinated because we are like participating in deliberately blocking supplies. So I wanted to add that piece. And then briefly, very quickly, people might have seen the white riot at the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick border, which is interesting. I mean, there was an initial point there, which was about Nova Scotia takes this like perverse pride in having the strictest restrictions in Canada, and not matching our public health to like changing conditions. So obviously we all accept that we need to stay home and isolate and get the vaccine. Well, most of us accept this, but then like when the conditions change, you have to make sure that you have the least restrictions to match the best health outcome. And our province isn't really doing that. Like we did an illegal injunction to block protests completely and arrested like Palestinian people, like sitting in their cars, having a car parade. Like they literally went to court secretly and got a secret injunction to stop protests, which was supposed to be for the anti-maskers, and then they used against other protests, right? So we have like really strict restrictions, and we were supposed to open up the border to New Brunswick. And then at the last minute, they were like, no, because the virus is in the rest of Canada, it will come to us. And so people are really mad, which is justifiable. But then the MLA that led that protest, Elizabeth Smith McCrossan, who is racist, she also is notorious for saying that if we legalized cannabis, we'd become like Jamaicans, unproductive and lazy. Oh yeah, I like had to report on this story like 2 years ago. She stood up in the legislature and said that she was scared of legalizing cannabis because she knows Jamaicans, and like Jamaicans are lazy people. And like, so like she's racist, like let's just be upfront, like she's racist. And, she was the one that really pushed this protest. And then of course it turned into a bunch of like anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers. They like stopped a truck that they thought was carrying vaccines, which was actually carrying like blood products to the hospital. And so like she got kicked out of the PC caucus. Like they got rid of her. Like they were like, bye. But then she says the PC leader actually like said it was okay and is only backing off now because it was like so disastrous and unpopular. My point being that those white people who went to the border and blockaded the border like got away with it. They got to do that. Meanwhile, I've heard from at least 3 separate Black families that have been stopped at the border with like guards with like guns on their, like hands on their guns, like drawn down, like people like having 5 cars with like border people like surround them, like chasing them, stuff like this, So as always, it's for us and not for them, right? So like white people can continue to do what they want, which is no surprise. And like just commenting white people can do what they want becomes so meaningless because it's like, yeah, it's like your mom saying, well, like if your friends jumped off a bridge, But yeah, so that's also Nova Scotia. The last thing I want to say is I just want to shout out Dr. Tiffany Richards. I did a piece on her, and this goes to what Sarah was saying about a lot of the success in vaccine rates and health measures is because of Black people like taking account of our own community. So I just want to shout out Dr. Tiffany Richards, who's doing her internship at St. Joseph's in Toronto, but is from Truro and spends like time every evening just going into like threads on Facebook and Twitter and stuff and trying to like correct Black people's misinformation on vaccines. And she's doing that after like her 16-hour shift in the hospital when she could be doing anything else because she's like cares so passionately about like the health of our communities. So it's people like her. And by the way, she's in the family medicine rotation. She told me there's 103 people and only 3 Black people at St. Joseph's. So it's like 103 people in the residency program, 3 of whom are Black, all Black women, like 2 Eritrean women and her. So like that's still like, I was like, what? Like I would have thought in Toronto there'd be more, but no. So that gives you an idea of like the medical landscape. But just to close, I really like, yeah, exactly. It's the work of people like her that are really doing work to like help our community. So much love to them.
Yeah.
Warren, last comment.
I don't have a comment. I actually wanted to just add value to what Ella said. Can we put the name of that doctor right there in that comment so people can find her? Ella, is that okay? Can we do that? Because I think a lot of people need that information. Find her. Like, or at least access the information she has available.
Yeah, I'll add the article into our chat that I did, and then people can see it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So,
yeah, thank you.
All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to close it out. Another spirited conversation by all of y'all. Thank you so much for taking the time to stop by. And since a certain lady's going to see Simone go crush it, any final comments and where people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can email me, al.j1es@msvu.ca. Still not on Twitter. Still scared of Twitter. Can't get on my Facebook. They won't increase the limits. But yeah, and just, shout out to all the Black women living life effortlessly and pissing people off while doing it. Queen Simone has the goat on her leotard, and it's like,
they were on her flip-flops too. I saw it on her flip-flops.
Yeah. Like she always has a goat, and people just can't handle like a Black woman who knows that she's good. Like she's not flaunting it. She just is. She knows she's good and she's embracing it, and like people can't handle her. So, every Black woman can learn from this. Like just embrace your strength, embrace your power. Like you're always going to have haters. So own it and like just be out there. So yeah, we're all excited for, like I think Simone, who has come into this like white sport and transformed it. And now you look, her entire gym is all Black women. Like they sent like 7 Black girls to like trials. So we're taking over too, So like, And they try to change the point so she can't win. They keep giving her scales like lower points. So, and that just shows you that like they can never defeat us. So we always talk about these really hard issues and like white supremacy. And I just want to acknowledge, like, not even, we don't have to be Simone. We can just be cooking our dinner or like raising our kids or like living our lives in community. But we know we can like have that greatness as Black women and as Black people. And like, we cannot let ourselves get knocked back by all this. We just have to keep embracing our strength unapologetically. So shout out Simone, and I'm going to go watch her.
All right, no problem. Sarah?
All day, every day, as a former gymnast myself, yes. But I'd also like to shout out Sha'Carri Richardson. Yeah, LSU Tiger, what? With her orange hair, yellow hair, green hair, I don't care. They need to stop hating on a girl and just let a sister run, because, you know, Flojo and them have, you know, they started something. Sha'Carri and them are just continuing the legacy. But again, this whole thing with our First Nations and Indigenous and the Inuit who still are looking for their children with the whole tuberculosis airlift thing and the 60 scoop people. And, I mean, there's just a litany of injustices and horrors that our Indigenous people have lived through. I would like to, like Cesar, you know, again, affirm, you know, my solidarity and hope that more and more of us in our wider Black community are going to get on board this learning, healing, and reconciling journey. Just because we're immigrants and we ourselves are victims of anti-racism from the mainstream white community, that no, we don't get let off the hook for that. Okay, the whole the victim status hierarchy thing doesn't work in this context. So let us be mindful of this and what we are going to do to be part of the solution / healing journey for the First Nations, especially on Canada Day, July 1st. Get your orange shirt.
And how can people contact you?
Black on Black at Hotmail, Black on Black 891 at hotmail.com. Black on Black airs every Saturday from 11 a.m. to noon Eastern Time on CHUO 89.1 FM here in Ottawa and online, CHUO.FM.
Thank you. Warren?
Closing thoughts, you know, thank you for this opportunity. I'm not on mute this time, so look at that. Things have changed. You know, I'm not gonna be long-winded. I think I was long-winded for most of the program. I think the only thing I want to not today. No, it wasn't. Okay, cool. Usually I get called out for not saying much, but okay, cool. You know, I really echo what Sarah mentioned. I think it's important to continue to learn about Indigenous peoples right now. I think that's the topic of discussion. Respectfully said, I think, you know, let's take these matters seriously, and please, I think it's important to wear your orange shirts on Canada Day. So I'm going to mention that. Yeah, I'm going to go back to writing because that's what I'm going to do. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at warrenclark.ca. Yes, I am Googleable.
You're Googleicious.
Googleable, as young people. Warren, you're Googleable. It's like, oh, that's a word. I didn't know that.
Good stuff. Good to have you here as always, my man. Cesar?
Thank you so much. As the last thing, I just want to remind our people, wear your orange shirt on Canada Day, show support. But don't forget about the plight of all of our Black people worldwide. Quick mention to Brazil, the fate of 24-year-old pregnant mother, Kathleen Romeo, who was killed by police as she was just walking with her family. A stray bullet from police killed her in basically in Brazil. And regarding me, you reach me on Facebook, easier, Cesar Remy, R-I-M-Y, Emery, E-M-E-R-Y. Thank you.
All right. Guys, you can be on your way. It's Dr. Vibe here. I am the host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of epic conversations. I am the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And I host the only online show in the world for fathers and dads. It's sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I am the board chair of the Global Food and Drink Initiative. It's a multimedia not-for-profit that's based in Oakland, but I'm here in Toronto. I'm the board chair. And what we do is we highlight Blacks in the diaspora that are doing their thing in food, wine, and travel. I'd like to thank a few people for watching this live. Kevin and Serena, thank you for your comments. You helped make this conversation epic. I want to thank everyone who watched this live or going to be watching it on the replay or listening to it on the replay. Finally, I'd like to close off with a few things. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions. Aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Also, love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourself grace. And an announcement. We are going to be taking this part of the Black Canada Talking, which is on every Sunday or most Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to start doing our roundtables bi-weekly starting on July 11th. Now, we may not have all 4 participants on at the same time, but two of them to 3 of them have committed, or 3 of them have committed to be on bi-weekly. So get ready. July 11th, we're going to start taking it bi-weekly. And the main reason is you want more. And plus, there's so much stuff going on that holding it once a month, the roundtable, isn't justifiable enough. You saw today how much stuff, and there was still a whole bunch of stuff that we left off the table. So we're going to start going bi-weekly. We thank you for your support. It's appreciated and not taken for granted. So on closing, I want to say thanks to BIA Media for another great, excellent production job. God bless, peace to all, keep the faith, and remember, walk good and give yourselves grace. Bye, everybody. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, and it is Black Canada Talking time. Black Canada Talking is a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes on stories, POVs that are of importance to them, or we showcase Black Canadians who are doing their thing.
The real aspect of what goes on behind the walls or behind the fence is a totally different persona and a totally different picture.
There was just a big sense of relief when we finally got there.
We have to realize that everything we do is going to have an impact on probably a lot of people we don't even know.
One of the mandates of the CBC is to reflect Canada back to itself.
Not a lot of sustainable long-term movement that will effect economic change.
God bless, peace well, keep the faith, and walk good.